Hi everyone, my name is Julie. This is Keep Calm with Books and Coffee. I talk about books on this channel, mainly books about magic, and today we're going to find out if my books that I chose for self-destruct self-destructed. So if you haven't heard of a self-destruct list, typically what people do is they choose a bunch of books and they say, I'm going to read these in about a year. And if I don't read them in a year, they are going to self-destruct and go off my list. So I decided to choose 6 books for 6 months and then reevaluate, because so often at the beginning of the year we create lists that are 12 months long and we're going to read all these books, and then by the time I get to month 4 I'm not in the mood for any of those books. So I was trying to give myself a good medium pace for my mood reading to do 6 books in 6 months. Well, it is nearly the end of August, and not quite the end of August, it is mid-August, and I forgot about this and just looked at my list again. So we are gonna reassess and we're gonna talk about the books that I chose and a new TBR for this, and then maybe one that's kind of in the middle. So the first book that was on this list is Circe by Madeline Miller, and this is actually the one that I've read most recently. This is the one that actually kind of inspired this video, because I recently picked this up and tried to read it and I was like, this was on a list for something. It was on my 24 and 24, but it was also on my self-destruct list, and I'm actually DNFing this book. I really wanted to love this. It is gorgeous. The end papers are absolutely beautiful, and I was so excited to get to this. I've had it for years. It's a Greek mythology retelling, and unfortunately this just wasn't for me. The storytelling style just was not in my wheelhouse, and I couldn't get into this book. I gave it about 50 pages, and at the end of that 50 pages I just wasn't interested. So the first book is off my shelf, but unfortunately it was a DNF. Next up was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and this was a YA mystery thriller, and I did read this one as well. I actually picked this up, I think, in May and read it, but this nearly put me in a reading slump. I nearly DNF'd this one as well, but I ended up finishing it and giving it a 3-star. I honestly don't think that I'm going to end up reading the rest of the series. This just didn't have enough appeal for me to want to keep going, and a 3-star really isn't something that I want to continue reading, but I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I got it off my shelf. But again, not a successful book. Number 3 was The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is actually the first of 2 books in this series that I had on my shelf, and as much as I wanted to read this follows Alec and Magnus somewhere in the Mortal Instruments series, I believe. These were the last 2 Cassandra Clare books that I had on my TBR, and as much as I wanted to read this because I'm invested in Alec and Magnus's story, there's no 3rd book on the docket for this series. There's no conclusion, and I just wasn't thrilled about starting a series that had no end date. I've done that for other authors and it hasn't always worked out. So I just decided that since I've DNF'd the other series in her world, I've kind of stopped reading Cassandra Clare just because I'm not interested in it anymore. I decided to just unhaul this book unread, and therefore the sequel as well. Number 4 is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I think this is the only really successful win book on this list. This was a 4.75 star when I read it earlier this year for my TBR and review video, and I had a great time with this. I absolutely loved it. I'm so glad that this project and TBR and review motivated me to pick it up, and absolutely fantastic. Loved it to bits. Might even bump it up to a 5-star at some point, maybe on a reread, because I just loved it so much. But yes, this one off my shelf, read and absolutely loved. And by off my shelf, I mean off my TBR, because it's on my shelf now. Number 5 is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and this is actually one that I also unhauled unread. It's sort of in the same vein as Cassandra Clare. I'm not reading a lot of YA fantasy anymore, and after reading the description of this and seeing it was fantasy as well as dystopian, I don't know the last time I read a dystopian book, and I don't know the next time I will. I'm really burnt. I got so burnt out on them when we read them all those years ago, and this one, just as much as I want to read it, I also don't think I'm in the space for it, so I decided to unhaul this. It's not one that I'm completely saying no to ever. Cassandra Clare, I'm pretty much no, I'm not going to read those. And Ember in the Ashes, I could go back to at some point because I'm still interested. I just didn't see myself reading it in the next few years. And then number 6 is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. And so I put this on this list and I didn't get to this one. This would be the one that I would say self-destructs and I would have to unhaul it. However, I'm giving myself a very last chance with this book because I really want to read it and I really want to start this series and give it a shot. I also have the audiobook of this, so even if I unhaul this book without trying it, I still have a way to read it. So I think I've decided that I'm going to give myself to the end of the year. This is on my like full year self-destruct list, and I'm going to just give myself a little grace with this one. Since I had very few successes here, I wasn't like gunning to go back to this group of books, but we're going to give this one more chance, and along with a few others on this list. Leviathan Wakes is one of the oldest books on my TBR, and actually a lot of these were really old TBR books, so I tried to mix it up this time and choose ones that were both old and ones that I am not sure I would get to other than, you know, this project kind of pushing me to get to them. So the first one is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is one that I am really not sure I'm gonna like. I've heard mixed things about it across the booktubes and I've never ended up trying it. I've heard things that both make me think I'm gonna like it and also things that I think I'm gonna hate it. So I want to try this before the end of the year and get it off my TBR. I also have Nobleman's Guide to Seducing a Scoundrel by KJ Charles. I pre-ordered this and was so excited to get it, and then I never picked it up. I really want to just pick this up, read it, and have a good time with it here in the fall. And I think it might be because it's like Christmas colors that it's kind of throwing me off. I might need a push to read it, but definitely want to check this out. And the next one is The Kiss Countdown by Etta Easton, and this is sort of representative of a bunch of books on my shelf, but I chose this one because there are a bunch of romances I got from a romance subscription from my local indie that has recently stopped, and I just want to, they were kind of piling up on my shelf, and I chose one at random to kind of pick and say, I need to get into these and sort of clear some of these off my TBR before the end of the year, because I think these could easily languish on my shelves if I don't. And then the 5th and final one is Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies Ukambawa, and this is a high fantasy that, or maybe sci-fi, maybe a blend, I'm not 100% sure. I remember reading this first chapter in a Barnes & Noble years ago and picking it up thinking I'm definitely going to read this soon, and then I never got around to it. I can't even remember the last time I put this on a TBR for anything, so that's a priority for me and I want to give it a shot. So those are the 5 books that I am putting on a self-destruct list for the end of the year. Now, like I said, I'm giving myself a little grace with Leviathan Wakes because I just want to. It's my game, my rules. And then at the end of the year, if I haven't read these, that's really going to be the end of them. So that's it for me today. If you have any thoughts or feelings or want to share anything about the books that I talked about today or how I broke the rules, please let me know down below. And if you want to see me again, go ahead and like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.